Well, so latency, proximity. The other word I think we kind of been dancing around is like ecosystems. Like, did cloud kill data centers? I think it accelerated a move out of siloed infrastructure and siloed environments to more connected and ecosystem-driven ones. Cloud being a very rich ecosystem. Each of the clouds actually, but then all of the clouds together. And I think that's what determines a lot of these things. I want access to, Stripe, and I want access to my security vendor and my partners. Like, they're everywhere. That's like one part of it. And the other ones are like, who are you trying to reach? You're trying to reach people through Verizon. You're trying to reach people through, whatever, Sean, you have in Berlin, like these are all things that determine in the end, hey, why is Uber slow today? Or what kind of, other thing I'm trying to do as a person. Or
so, Jacob, would you say that Kubernetes kind of bridges that gap a bit with private data center, where it can kind of bring along that ecosystem, right? With the
I think that Kubernetes, buzzword time, Kubernetes. I remember talking a lot with Dan Kahn when he was just starting the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, because same neighborhood in New York, and debating cloud native Kubernetes. Is that a word? What are we going to do? But I love it now because everyone understands it to be sort of like a control plane experience that normalizes a lot of things. And I completely agree. I mean, will there be a next Kubernetes? Of course.
Yeah.
But for now, I think Kubernetes has, there's a lot to it. It's not easy. You guys know, you run Kubernetes, for people. But the idea of Kubernetes as a sort of normalization layer that abstracts just enough, I think it's super relevant to that promise of like, put it where you need to put it and let it move at the speed it needs to move.
Kubernetes is one thing. I meant even more, I guess, like the cloud native compute foundation and the ecosystem that comes along with it, right? That, like you said, if you want payments or you want, ingress, you want whatever, right? Like just plug and play, build your own cloud, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have marketing talk again, but like we have a little tagline internally, which is like, your vision statement that everyone has, tattooed on your arm or whatever. And or on your coffee cup, could be your coffee cup, which is like to, that we say digital leaders will consume on demand globally from an ecosystem of providers. They'll assemble infrastructure and stuff from an ecosystem of providers. And it's that exact cloud native promise, which is like, boop, boop, boop. Some of it I created, some of it I bought, some of it's open source. And you're assembling that because you're trying to differentiate. You're trying to do something at scale. You're trying to do it differently.
So would you consider that as a place for sort of niche providers in a world where we tend to think of, public cloud as, AWS, Google, Microsoft.
Yep.
But what about, so-called niche players?
I look at it as bell curve and non-bell curve. Like, you could call it niche, but I mean, I think like there are most businesses that are really scaled are not homogenous, right? With others. There's like, you could probably pick any two mobile carriers and their architectures and the way they do business can be very different. But how many mobile carriers are there? Like 5 in the US, 4, And so that's an example to me of bell curve versus not. And I think public cloud as it currently is, and it's evolving. So we can't just kind of say it's the way, but public cloud was designed for, I think, the 80% bell curve especially.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that the other stuff is more niche for sure, but it's also huge. And I think it's more about like a yes and, conversation than a like either or. And that's what we have to help make possible. And even you can see with, the public clouds kind of reaching into private infrastructure in their own ways are trying to solve for that problem.
But that's an interesting one, because everything you're talking about here is this idea of, okay, having an ecosystem of SaaS companies is really success. And I say that, SaaS providers.
Right, yeah.
If you're building out in a more traditional model where you're using containers, you're using some level of virtualization, you're putting your own software down, you're probably using one of those big 3 providers if you're using cloud. So do you think that the cloud providers are likely to get to the point where they will allow you to have true portability across the 3 different companies that are competing with each other? Or is it up to somebody else to create that abstraction layer across those cloud providers, forcing them to become commoditized?
Yes, and I mean, I don't know. I have enormous respect for the public clouds and their ability to execute and prosecute business. I mean, it's an amazing. They're all amazing businesses. So we'll give it that. So I wouldn't,
I'm not knocking them at all.
wouldn't count anything out, right? But I think that there are, I forget which of our silicon friends calls it custom clouds, right? Like expertise in mobility and autonomy, expertise in media and entertainment, expertise in like the challenges that each company or industry faces. I think we'll see a lot of verticalized solutions that, maybe. I mean, look at even like Zoom. I mean, Zoom was a a particular vertical until like it became a whole thing. And I think that that's an interesting kind of example of like, well, what's the infrastructure, software, and overall solution set that's going to enable that kind of vertical? And so I would think we're going to have a lot of custom clouds going forward at very big scale, and that number will grow as we find new workloads that need to suddenly be huge.